Welcome to Breaking Doctrine, Foxhole Fundamentals, a U.S. Army Combined Arms Center podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the official position of the United States Army, the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, or the Combined Arms Center.
Welcome to Breaking Doctrine, Foxhole Fundamentals, a U.S. Army Combined Arms Center podcast that addresses the basic tenets, principles in Army doctrine. I'm Captain Wyatt Harper, and this podcast topic is Create Shared Understanding. With me today is Sergeant Major Bill Ferguson, the Sergeant Major of the Mission Command Center of Excellence. Previously, Sergeant Major served as the Battalion Command Sergeant Major for the 4th Engineer Battalion at Fort Carson, and then went on to serve as the Brigade Command Sergeant Major for the 1st Engineer Brigade at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Sergeant Major, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much, sir. It's great to be on here and to be able to talk out to our audience of some non-commissioned officers, junior officers, and just folks out there in the field that are doing the great work for the nation. And we're up here in beautiful Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and in Tradoc. It's our job to make sure that we're providing all the things that we need to for the force, and I think it's good to have that touch point between the generating force and the operating force to have these discussions. So looking forward to doing this and looking forward from feedback from the field.
Awesome. So in this episode, we are going to discuss how to create shared understanding. And isn't just something that commanders need to focus on, but something everyone in the formation needs to worry about. So whether you're in a leadership role and you're trying to get soldiers to understand you, or you're in a follower role and you're trying to understand your leaders, it can be challenging. Shared understanding is also a principle that's in Mission Command, so getting everybody on the same page is incredibly important, and we're going to cover that today. But the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate, or CAD, has produced ADP 622, Army Leadership and the Profession, in audiobook form, as well as ADP 60, Mission Command, Command and Control of Army Forces. Both of these have good sections on how to create shared understanding, but here's a clip from the audiobook from ADP 622, Army Leadership and the Profession.
Create shared understanding. Competent leaders know themselves, the mission, and the message. They owe their organizations and subordinates information that directly applies to their duties, providing context and purpose. Sharing information contributes to shared understanding. Additionally, sharing information prepares subordinates for future duties and greater responsibility.
The audiobook versions of ADP 622 as well as ADP 60 are available on the Central Army Registry, and we'll put that link in the show notes. So, Sergeant Major, today we're going to talk about shared understanding and how you create that. Oftentimes in the after-action review, the AAR, we'll hear either sustains or improvements, and they always kind of come back to communication being an issue. And that has many factors tied to it, right? So we can have an equipment aspect, like my radio lost its fill, or the plan wasn't clear. In the case that it goes well, what I've heard in my experience, and I'm sure you have too, is that you hear people say everyone knew what they were supposed to do. I knew my role. I knew what my platoon's role was. And this isn't just at the tactical level either. We see this at the operational level as well. So I'd like to start off with just your thoughts and experience on when communication was poor. And we'll start there, and then I want to know the circumstances, and then if you can recall the consequences, so we can kind of convey the importance of having shared understanding.
Nope, this is good, and I think it's really good to focus back onto what the doctrinal terms are for shared understanding. And there might be some angst out in the field on hey, doctrine, it kind of has a negative connotation to it for some things. But if you take it in things as a term of the playbook, we all have to know what the playbook is, because when the conditions change on the battlefield and we need to know when it's appropriate to call an audible, then we know how to go back to, hey, what is the fundamental here? And everyone knows those fundamentals, and therefore we can make an audible on the call, and we're still speaking the same language out there to our peers on the left and right, and to our soldiers in higher headquarters, and they'll be able to know where we're going when we have to deviate from the original plan. So it's good to know what shared understanding means for the whole team to be on it. When things were not so well, when communication was poor. Yes, there's plenty of examples we can have. But what I would like to go back to is a culture of when I had communications and shared understanding was poor. And, there's a couple things, to unravel with this. So over a decade ago, I was platoon sergeant deployed, right? We had those experiences. And during those 15 months of a deployment, I had 3 platoon leaders. And that was quite interesting. And you change that dynamic and that relationship between you and your platoon leader each time and going through. Midway through the deployment, we had a platoon sergeant LPD of some sort with the battalion command team. And it was something to where the battalion commander was saying, hey, we were discussing all the things that were going well and not going well with the organization. And it was something to where the battalion commander was like, hey, platoon sergeants, I don't think you're clear of what my intent is. And I thought I was going to get fired because I said, sir, we've been here for quite a while. I don't know what your intent is. Can you elaborate? Can you share that with us? Because our mission has changed multiple times during this right here. We have seen lots of transition in leadership and a lot of transition in our mission. And that hasn't been necessarily communicated so well. To the point to where I was on patrol with my platoon leader, and the battalion commander ran into us in the city, and he pretty much cussed out my platoon leader for us our mission wasn't targeted towards his intent. And it kind of created a culture to where we weren't understanding what his intent was as, the battalion commander down through the company and to the platoon. And I wasn't in a position to where I could help my platoon leader with communicating what that intent was when we're planning and executing these missions. A lot of the things we were doing, we were striving to meet what we thought was his intent, but we didn't have that clear communication to where we had feedback mechanisms such as confirmation briefs or anything like that. We were more stuck in a patrol life cycle of getting equipment ready, doing a debrief, getting a pre-brief, and going out, and we weren't necessarily focused on a lot more of the task and purpose. We thought what we had was a task and purpose, but it was rudimentary in nature. We didn't see how our platoon's mission was nested in the company and battalion level. And that's where, I knew this all throughout growing up the career. You know that you need to know what the mission is, the commander's intent, and the mission and commander's intent of 2 levels up. You get so busy with execution all the time that sometimes you take those things for granted, that you understand what it is and you don't, and you're moving on, and you're at risk in mission going on based off what you thought was an existing intent, and we were missing it. And that was something that me and the platoon leader definitely had to work on, with saying, hey, let's ensure that, we're getting this from our higher headquarters and we're conveying it down, and now we're having more, focused mission sets versus achieving, some metrics on the wall of, hey, where are we going? Hey, have we, engaged? How many partnerships missions did we have with the local security forces, the local Army? Did we ensure that the civil affairs project go on? Were we doing combat route clearance missions? Were we doing partnership missions here? When we were doing the cordon search or getting after these time-sensitive targets? We had a various mission set, and therefore we were really focused on how to get each one of those missions done to standard, but not seeing how it was all coming together and tying it to the commander's overall picture. We were missing it at the platoon level, and we didn't address it ourselves, and that was our job as the platoon leadership to get that refined guidance. Because it was out there, it just wasn't, we didn't have a good system of getting these things down, and we didn't have a good enough touch points with the company and battalion command team to ensure it happened. And that's one of the big takeaways that I had with my platoon leader, is making sure that we had that, because we had some disconnects at our end, and our soldiers were paying the cost of it. What really impacted the soldiers was, we were going on a mission every day, and some risky missions. Yes, we were, had some small arms fire engagements, IED detonations. We did have a couple soldiers in the battalion that were wounded. luckily, we didn't have any soldiers in our organization that were KIA. But the focus of the soldiers was just getting ready for the next mission, not necessarily understanding, hey, how it was all tied into. And, for years that we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, this is the mindset of some of our soldiers. This is their third deployment, right? So it was kind of like, okay, hey, we're here again, we're doing these things, and now we seem to be doing a lot of the same things in a different environment. So it was very taxing on the soldiers to be able to do that. And after the discussions we had and helping the soldiers get through, the task and purpose, and getting some more buy-in and getting a lot better feedback from them to help inform and shape and give the, company and battalion commander a clearer picture for shared understanding at their end of what they're seeing from us on the battlefield. Because if we weren't getting after, the commander's intent, we had to tell them, hey, this is why we were probably missing it here in this area, because these things are happening as well. So it improved a little bit by being able to do that, but yes, the soldiers were definitely at some low points with these things, and I think it was probably just some exhaustion that the PL and I had as well, to where we weren't able to see a lot of their struggles with this until we had this breaking point. And I'm glad we had it, but I wish it would have happened a lot earlier in the rotation and in that mission than 8 months in.
Mm-hmm. What about when a unit leader has created shared understanding? How did they do it? What did that look like?
Some great examples of shared understanding. There's a few of them to where they're not, they could pick up on whether or not the mission is received by reading people's actions or adjusting the progress in the unit. What I've seen some commanders do and some leaders do is they start doing concentric circles around their desk. So if there is something not happening well in the organization, it's like, well, why are we not getting right here? So the leaders have started to say, well, what am I doing now to where I'm not doing? Am I not communicating the clear message? Is there something that's in my organization of, hey, if we're having our training meeting and we're discussing this, are we covering the intent purpose for it to create that? What are we doing to enable that shared understanding? When you have leaders that say, instead of, hey, my soldier's not getting after my intent, they started thinking, what am I doing to ensure that comes out with that? And it's like, hey, what does the mission say? If we're just giving our units a list of tasks to be done, then, just being more aware of, hey, what am I doing right now in my area? And then getting that feedback from, say your XO, your ops sergeant, your ops sergeant major, your S3, or at the company level. It's like, hey, getting that good feedback. As a first sergeant, one of the best feedback I had was from my company operations sergeant for when, the commander and I were, putting some missions out, and the company operations sergeant was like, hey, first sergeant, you're not seeing these things very well. This is how you need to readdress this, because, the issues that second platoon and first platoon are on different pages is because you're communicating to them at separate times versus bringing them in together and getting that feedback. And that they both think that you're getting after what you and the commander want to, but they're doing it in a different way. And I just want you to take another look at that. And having those advisors to help you out with that is, it's great. You have to have some trusted advisors and folks that can be your sounding boards and to help you be aware of your blind spots. And a lot of folks will refer to them as guardrails. You need to have guardrails in your organization because they will help you make sure that you're slowing down around the curves or anything like that.
So you think that with that approach that you mentioned was that a battalion commander that would ask, am I doing the right thing, or are you guys, okay?
Right, that was the battalion commanders. And concentric circles around my desk. Let's start, if we start to assume that the problem is someone else, then, you're not going to get after the solution. We have to be self-aware of what we have going on. So if we're always looking for, some mission command system to blame, a SOP to blame, or anything like that, we have to say, well, what am I in charge of? Because I'm the leader. So let's start with concentric circles around me and say, okay, well, what is the information I've gotten out? Have I been a good communicator? Am I only communicating via email? Am I, paying attention as much during the meetings I have to? Am I saying something different to my subordinate units? If I'm a battalion sergeant major and I'm talking to my first sergeants, but I'm not sharing all that same information with my staff, then I'm not creating shared understanding. It has to be having those multiple touch points and, be able to do that. And some of the great enablers for that is, what is the culture in your unit, right? So if you have a cohesive team in your unit, you can't have, the chicken before the egg. You want to have them, together. But if your unit is very cohesive, if you're doing the good hails and farewells together, if you're having a right arm night, if you're having, some things to where it's not just a mandatory fun day, if you're having an organizational day that you have some spouse buy-in or any of those other things going on, if you're doing a dining in, a dining out, the normal traditions that definitely help bring in a unit, then you're going to create an environment to where the staff, the command, the company ops, the platoons, they're getting together and they have no problem. There's no barriers between the communication because of the culture that's in there. So even if you do have a gap, if somehow that, I'm a first sergeant and I'm sharing information with my platoon sergeants are definitely going to make sure that, the maintenance sergeant wasn't in there. So let's make sure that the motor sergeant knows what's going on, and we're going to have this good feedback from the ops sergeant, because you have a cohesive unit that knows that shared understanding is a part of how you build cohesive teams and mutual trust. So if there are gaps with that unit cohesion helps with shared understanding. But you get that when you have a leader that knows it could be me as well. If you have a leader that doesn't find, doesn't realize that they might have a hole in their swing, then, you might not have such a cohesive unit.
You think that leader aspect is something more personality driven, or is it which is not taught? Or do you think there's an element of experience and something that we can be teaching about that self-assessment?
Absolutely. I definitely think personality is in there, and being self-aware of how you like to receive information and things like that. But that's why we have command teams. That's why we have XOs. That's why we have operations, the sounding boards to be in there. So, the adage is, you got to let the emperor know that he has no clothes on, right? So you have to be able to do that. And, and as a sergeant major, I have to know, hey, boss, am I doing the right things well? Because if we don't have this, that is our role as senior enlisted advisors. If you're a platoon sergeant and you and the PL are not on the same sheet of what's going on, then it's your job to say, hey, sure, ma'am, let's take a look around us. What are we doing at the platoon level to figure out why is third squad not getting after what we need to when it comes to sergeant's time training, or when we're trying to get through gunnery tables, 1 through 4 at their level. What are we doing to get after that? Because if we have gaps, then hey, that's on us as the platoon command team, if you will, to figure that out. It's not on necessarily only on the squad leader and that team leader, because that's our job to be a counselor, a coach, a mentor to help them to get to those things. And each one of those, comes in with, that leader's, individual accountability, self-maturity to solve their own problems. But it's on us. If we start doing that as command teams, that's how you could build it, because one personality might not be the same, and therefore as a command team, you could, again, show those blind spots and be each other's guardrail when it comes to that. So it's teachable, I would say, as a good command team to do it. As an individual, if you're lacking self-awareness and you don't have anyone to tell you about it, I don't think it's going to happen very well.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Hopefully, that's like you said, that's why I'm an officer, so that's why we have sergeant majors and warrant officers too.
Absolutely.
Well, like
DA civilians.
Civilians, like
100%. Even our drivers. Oh man, our drivers, that we have, some folks want to say enlisted age or whatever, and some folks say, sergeant majors, you're not authorized to drive around your MTO. Probably not. Yeah. But man, what a great asset it is to have a soldier that's right there being the advisor. Like, hey, Sergeant Major, by the way, do you know that, what you and the commander have got going on? It's like, hey, there's a lot of soldiers that don't know, say, about the ACFT, and they don't have anything about that. I'm like, all right, good. And that means that the battalion commander and I can go out there and talk to soldiers about their doubts and concerns with the ACFT, but how it relates to, hey, are soldiers fit enough to do our wartime mission? And the ACFT is a better way of doing it. And if we can relay those things as that, but if we didn't have our soldier, our command team driver, if you will, give us that good feedback and let us know what some of the blind spots are for shared understanding, then, that I could say might not be an MTO position, but it's invaluable to be able to get those touch points. And that's a way that you can get feedback and shared understanding. Because it's been said before, the higher you get up to the top, the less you are to receive the truth. So the more people you have around you that can tell you the truth is invaluable.
I agree. And oftentimes we think about communication as in one aspect. How do I get my point across? However, I think we can make a strong case that the best communicators are the best listeners as well. So why do you think it's hard for some leaders to sit back and just listen?
So there's some trust issues, and we added competence as a principle of the mission command, for some of these reasons. So there's lots of factors that would inhibit someone's ability to listen. If it's our own ego or a hubris that just doesn't allow for us to listen to others. But if you are an advisor to anyone, if you're going to go speak truth to power, is to be able to do it with passion, not emotion, and based off some good viewpoints, based off of your expertise, experience, and I'd say competence. I think those are the things that enable to be able to do that. Self-awareness is a big part of it. Is how well do you like to receive information, and how do you receive information? So knowing that and saying, hey, how do I like to get feedback into it? If your body language is off, right? If you always have a no face on you. If you want to make sure that you're the smartest person in the room and you make other people aware of it, then you're not going to get that feedback and collaboration and insight. And diversity is not just diversity based off of gender, religion, creed, race, sexual orientation, anything. Diversity is about diversity of thought. And I would say all that diversity brings in a different perspective and different experiences and things like that. And just a diversity of thought in any organization helps improve that. And I think, as leaders, we have to be aware that that's why it's important to listen. We have to be aware of our biases. We have biases to where, say a simple bias is if you served in, say, 101st, then I automatically want to give you credibility because, I got to spend a couple of years there and, it was a great duty station and all that other stuff. But, do I have a favorable bias towards 101st, or if I have a different background, would I have a non-favorable bias towards it? And then am I aware of my own bias? Because that's something that's a similarity bias to me, or is that something to where I have a negative experience in how I receive information? Self-awareness of how well you receive information is good. But once you know that, once you know how you like to receive information, once you know how you like to listen and whether or not you have some gaps, to inform your team of how well you do it. Some folks will say that they're a visual learner, a conceptual learner. They like to see some things, and you say that, but the results are, hey, if we're showing, if we're building a terrain model for the platoon leader and the platoon sergeant, and it's not necessarily what they want, then maybe they aren't necessarily a visual learner, right? If it's, it's like, hey, how well are you receiving that to get the information in there? And you talked about it a little bit earlier. It's like whether or not you're hesitant to receive feedback. So it's candor. Right? Frank, honest, open discussion. That's what we want in our ranks. And I would say that's probably one of the things that, NCOs really pride ourselves on. The old NCO guide, it's a TC 22-6. It's a smaller yellow pamphlet. It's got 3 holes on the side so you can put it in your little leader book. That one definitely talked about candor, and that's the NCO's role, is to provide that frank, honest, open feedback. Well, as a leader, do you like to receive candor? I think everyone out there that's listening today would say, yeah, absolutely, I like to receive candor. Well, okay, how do you like to receive candor? And there's a great leader that's, lives a little bit down the road right here, and they talk about, it's like, okay, well, candor's great. Candor in private before the decision is made, always welcome, right? Let's have an open discussion. We're deciding, how we should do that, because now we're, planning our mission. Say we're doing our unit training plan at the platoon or company level, and we want to make sure we have that open dialogue to be able to get that thing done. So it's public, in here in this environment, or it could be private, that small working group, but it's all pre-decisional. So let's have all the open conversation in there. All right. Post-decision. All right, your unit training plan's laid out, and you can't be the NCO that's like, oh, that's a whole bunch of BS. Right? Because it's post-decisional. You might be right, but how well are you going to be received? You're doing that, and what else are you bringing onto the table when you're bringing that candor to here? Not all of us could be gunny highway, because we don't all have a Medal of Honor. We can't go talk to the Corps Commandant, Marine Corps Commandant, and say, hey, this is a big cluster. Fill in the blank. So post-decisional, you need to figure out, hey, how are you going to approach that, and how do you receive information? If you made a bad decision and you want folks to be able to have enough candor and courage to talk to you about it, let them know how you'd like to talk about it, and I would probably guarantee you would like to know about it in private. So post-decisional in private is probably a okay way to do it. All right, pre-decisional, public, it's okay. Pre-decisional in private, absolutely, it's all good. You go post-decisional, you made a unit training plan, you're briefing the op order, you're about to hit LD, and your squad leader says, man, this is all jacked up. Publicly, post-decisional, you might not receive that candor so well. And that was something that, I learned as a platoon sergeant as well. It's like, we briefed a plan, we got to that point, and we're like, hey, that happened, and I'm like, I did not react well to it, and it's not going to, and it's going to be kind of ugly. Okay. I need to be aware of that, and that way I can remain unemotional. I can address it as it needed to be at that time, and I could address the individual and say, oh, okay, hey, you have some valid points. Here's a better way of doing it. What are your points now? That we could address that, and I need to create a culture to make sure that NCO knows, hey, bring me this candor earlier in the decision-making process, probably in private, to be able to do these things. And that's, if we get to talk to folks about how we want to receive, say candor or bad news, know that how you like to receive it, and talk to your team about how to do that. And that creates shared understanding. When you know yourself and you get that feedback from your peers of how well you know yourself, I think that's really good to set an environment and a culture for creating shared understanding. And you won't have necessarily the morale issues or the indiscipline issues or anything else like that, to where, we're not going to run a mutiny or any of those other things, but we need to have a culture for open dialogue to where people are, there's a term out there, psychological safety. Do folks feel safe telling you what is on their mind in their organization? And we need to be able to do that. If this is my squad, if this is really going to work, then every leader needs to have that in that small group to make sure that we have an environment to where folks can be able to talk to us and we know how to communicate with each other. And we got to learn our little nuances. And if we have a little blind spot in there, we don't do this, then I think being able to recognize that amongst each other, how well we receive information or not, it's imperative.
We've talked about communication being a leader responsibility, but how about the followers? And you kind of touched on it, but what are your thoughts on followership?
Start with a confirmation brief or a back brief when you have this. So like, okay, if this is what our mission is going to be, if this is our way forward, okay, let's make sure and get that confirmation brief, back brief in there. But also it was like, hey, if staff sergeant of mine, as a platoon sergeant, if we had that conversation, like, I'd be able to say, all right, well, you own it now. This is going to be at the point. And as a platoon sergeant, one of the hardest things for me as a platoon sergeant is to realize I actually wasn't in charge of the platoon. The platoon leader's in charge of the platoon, and the squad leaders are really working for the platoon leader to get things done. And I'm really the platoon leader's advisor, and I'm a good mentor to the squad leaders. And, the rating chain is going to be different kind of in different units, but that's the role. So it's like, hey, as you're providing this thing, it's like, hey, squad leaders, do we all understand it? All right, this is your mission. What else do you need from me? And then once they get that to where it's like, hey, I do own this. And, that's where you really get into the followership. And to where it's leadership at their level, and their team leaders are, communicating that followership piece in there. But that's where we have, that overall, I would say, general military authority throughout the Army, and that's what's great. And, what is our number one advantage is our people in our Army, and it's the NCO Corps. The envy of all armies out there is that the NCOs, it's like, hey, once you have this, hey, we all know whatever mission is going to happen, it's probably going to happen at the company and below level. Then we're going to say NCOs make it happen. Right? So, that's the followership in there. If we ensure that we have a confirmation brief, a back brief, and we understand what's going on, hey, Sergeant, you own it now. You got it. All right, I'm here as a mentor, help you guide it, but, this is you. And, they'll, I would say I'm rarely surprised of what our subordinate units will do, but I'm always amazed with, the initiative and that's where the other aspects of mission command comes in, the initiative. Are we accepting risk at their levels that's appropriate to their level, at the, company and platoon level, are they accepting that because they have that shared understanding? They know exactly what their left and right limits are, doing that. And once it becomes owned at each individual level and say, hey, this is my squad. Yes, this is my platoon. This is my company. This is my mission. And as a whole, we get that. And that's where I would say followership, it's kind of what it means. It's like, hey, I've taken ownership at my level, and I've trusted, my higher headquarters, with giving me everything we need, and we got it from here. It's a good battle handoff of, delegation of authorities and responsibilities. Delegation of authority.
How did you prepare yourself in this realm?
There's a good leader out there, and I'll go ahead and name him. He's retired now. Only met him twice, actually, but I remember everything he said to me. And he talked about the NCO's role in mission command. And I've used this ever since, we had this conversation. It was in a small little LPD. And the NCO's role in mission command is to transmit, translate, and to inspire. Okay, I was like, all right, well, I wrote that down. It's 3 things. It's easy to remember. Good. It's in my book. I got it. But, you went on to elaborate. It's like, hey, our role as non-commissioned officers and leaders for that matter is to, communicate and make sure that the message is out. The information that we have, it's not just, note-taking, passing notes. It's like, hey, we need to ensure that the commander's intent is understood, 2 levels down. We need to get that down there. And there's an adage out there about a corps commander can get the message down to the private in like 97 days. I've heard that one recently. Okay, well, we need to find a way to continue to do that. We got to do command messaging as the NCOs to continue that. But it's more about putting out the message. And translating is probably a very important piece of it. So instead of just talking at our soldiers, talking at our people, we need to talk to them. And sometimes you might have to translate some things that comes from higher or a ALARAC that's out there that I don't understand. And no, I'm not telling you to interpret it and come up with your own meanings, but it's translated to where it understands to someone at their level. And, it's very hard to do, but knowing your audience, you can communicate why, this is important to them. It's like, why is the ACFT important to, your unit? Well, in our unit, say, we are bridge builders, and a panel of acro bridge weighs over 1,000 pounds. Well, we need to be relatively fit, and push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run might not get us there. Everything we do with war fighting, and the ACFT is a better measure of doing that we will be better combat engineers in placing a bridge panel. If we're able to communicate those things into terms to where folks can understand, that is our role as non-commissioned officers, because we have that experience and those touch points with enlisted soldiers from private through sergeant major, all those things, and we need to put ourselves back into those positions and have that good perspective to be able to communicate to them. A little bit of adding on to, how to translate. Recent discussion I had with someone is that you might have to tell someone 7 times in 7 different ways for them to own what you're saying, for them to really understand it. So it's not necessarily just having a consistent message, but to be able to say that message maybe in 7 different ways and 7 different times to have that consistency kind of, I'm not going to say beat in, but, a repetitive nature to where it's fully understood and embraced. And that's, a difficult challenge, as you're looking at, and that's, as I was thinking, I got the transmit, translate, and inspire. I got that down from being a battalion brigade sergeant major, but as I'm learning in this job is 7 times in 7 ways is helping me translate that message to where it's like I'm getting out of the talking at people and talking to them, because I'm able to relate with what they have going on. And then finally is inspiring. If you're doing the same things you're asking the soldiers to do, if you're doing the same things that your leaders are doing, if your audio is matching your visual, right? If that's going on, that's good for you. So leading from the front, doing those things, and then continuing to make sure that the soldiers have that task and purpose, they understand the why behind those things, and that's our role in Mission Command is, to transmit, translate, and to inspire. I've learned that, and I know it's not a doctrinal term yet, but yeah, Sergeant Major retired Mark Giannotti. He used to be the Capel Sergeant Major and over here just in the building, and I remember that from about 4 years ago. I'm still using it today to help me get better at creating shared understanding.
Cool, Sergeant Major. Anything else you want to add before you take off? No. Hey, team, thank you very much. If there's anything we could do out here in the generating force, out there for the operational force, because we all know what it's like to be in the foxhole and getting after those things. So thank you everything for what you're doing. If there's something we could do to provide you more information and tools that are more apt to what you're looking at, because we don't necessarily want to just throw doctrine out there. So that's why we're throwing, the audio books, the podcasts, or any other tools to put resources in the warfighter's hands. Let us know that feedback. And, that's a great honor to be here in the Mission Command Center of Excellence to be able to do that and to advocate for the warfighter and to kind of put those tools out there. So anything from the field that they need, just look us up and contact us, and then we'll see what we can do for you. Cool. Thanks,
it's a great time.
Major.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, I think that does it for this episode of Breaking Doctrine, Foxhole Fundamentals. I'd like to thank our listeners and note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the official position of the United States Army, the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, or the Combined Arms Center. I'm Captain Wyatt Harper. This is Breaking Doctrine, Foxhole Fundamentals.